So I stumbled across this game while browsing around at a local thrift store. I saw the cover and thought, looks kinda interesting. Went home, looked up some info on the game, and started getting more curious about it, in which I soon bought the title. When doing a little research to see if there was anything interesting about this game, I found out a bit about its development history, or at least supposedly its development history. I won't go into too much detail, but here's a summary of things. Vexx was developed by Acclaim Studios Austin, being led by David Deinstenberg. I'm not entirely sure that's how you pronounce it, and Thomas Coles, who wanted to make a mascot platformer for the upcoming 6th generation of game consoles. Originally, the game they were working on was going to be called Clip and Mischief, starring some sort of rodent creature named Clip, and Mischief was going to be his reptilian sidekick. This was scrapped because I guess the team was worried this would be too similar to Jak and Dexter. Then it was going to be called Jinx, but because of some legal issues, they changed the game's title to Vexx instead. On top of that, they decided to focus on the game's mechanics first and make a character who would complement them, rather than doing things the other way around. There's more to it than just that, but these are the bits I found to be the most interesting. Anyway, why don't we start taking an actual look at the video game itself? Before we explain the story's setup, we first need to get some context to the world of this game. To begin with, the story takes place on a planet called Estara, where a long time ago, one of the races of the world, the Estani, created a rift system that opened a portal to other worlds. One such world they were able to connect with was the home of these creatures called the Shadow Wraiths, who were led by their leader, Dark Yabu. The Shadow Wraiths attacked Estera and wiped out the Estani. Jump ahead quite a few years, and Dark Yabu is attacking the village of our lead, Vexx. Vexx and his people are captured and turned to slaves by Dark Yabu, and after so many days of mistreatment and whipping, Vexx attacks one of the guards. Upon doing so, Dark Yabu starts to torture him, thus prompting Vexx's grandfather to step in and attack Dark Yabu. Unfortunately, Vexx's grandfather gets killed, so later that night, Vexx sneaks into Yabu's ship for revenge, but finds the legendary talons, which cling to his arms. Vexx is informed by the spirit of the Estani that his grandfather's soul is trapped by Dark Yabu, and that with the power of the talons, he could free him and put an end to the Shadow Wraiths and Yabu. Vexx awakes to meet an old man named Darby, who informs him that by collecting the Wraith Hearts, they could power up the Rift Machine to enter the Shadow Wraith's home to put an end to things there. And there we have it. That's the basic setup. And you know what? I think it's fine. We have a good motivation for Vexx, get introduced to an interesting world, and we have a pretty clear and understandable goal. The downside is there isn't much for you to get out of the story than that. Sure, there's a little more to it than this that I won't spoil, but not much. I think there are a couple of downsides to this setup. One, Vexx is a silent protagonist, so we never really get to know his personality, and often this would be fine, but this is made an issue due to the second problem. That being, you don't meet any other characters, and the very few you do meet, you can't even interact with that much. Well, Estera is a cool looking world and ends up feeling empty, which for me ends up making the story pretty forgettable. At least there are these old journals you can find that were written by an Estani, so you get to read about what happened when the rift was opened, which is neat. I don't hate this story at all. Again, I think it's fine. Unfortunately, it just doesn't leave much of an impact on me, and I find it to be kinda forgettable. You know how a lot of 3D collectathon games are compared to Super Mario 64? Well, I'd have to say that that's a pretty fitting comparison when it comes to Vexx. Both games have a hub world that connects the player to the levels. Both games have a main collectible that allows you to progress. Both the games use a live system, unfortunately, and both games will kick you out of the level once you've obtained a main collectible. Of course, there are some differences. A lot, actually. First off, the hub world is very boring in Vexx, as it just takes you to the levels, giving you nothing else to explore in it. Vexx himself has some rather unique controls, and a strange focus on combat. Yeah, Vexx has quite a few moves for taking out enemies, which is fine since a fair amount of them take a lot of hits to kill, but honestly this just ends up making the enemies more of a nuisance than a challenge. Really, the best part of the combat is how you can juggle enemies or just constantly hit them to boost your rage meter. Once this meter is full, you can become super powerful and shoot out these lasers that are great for killing enemies. It's best used against larger monsters, however, I do tend to forget about this feature. It's still useful though, so keep it in mind. What's interesting is how a few of his moves are also useful in both combat and platforming. I mean, of course he has a long jump, but instead of a double jump, he has this flare kick that can help give you a little extra air as well as taking out enemies from above. Vexx can also do this ground pound attack that can hurt enemies below him or help save him from high falls when used just before hitting the ground. Admittedly, these controls are a bit weird and take some time to get used to, kinda like some of Mario's new moves in Odyssey. And just like in Odyssey, once you start getting used to this, you can start pulling off some cool tricks and risky jumps that feel quite satisfying. Aside from the enemies, the only other thing you're going to be fighting is the camera. It can be very finicky in certain situations and won't always give you the best angle for jumps. It only gets annoying sometimes on land, but underwater the camera can be a real pain. Thankfully, underwater movement is simple if a bit clunky, as you hold down one button for perpetual movement. It's okay, but isn't as smooth as Spyro. The attraction in this game, however, are the levels, as they are these very open world areas that offer a lot of exploration. All the levels have a day and night cycle to them that will change the lighting in outdoor levels. But in every level, nighttime is when the enemies will become stronger and more annoying, so try to stay in the daytime as much as possible. In every level, there is a time dial that you can find to change the level from day to night. So, let's get to the main collectible of this game, Wraith Hearts. You'll need to collect so many of these to unlock more levels and eventually to reach the end of the game. And, on the plus side, they are pretty generous about how many hearts you need to continue. So if you find yourself having trouble collecting one specific heart, then just move on to a heart that you have an easier time with, as you're free to do that. Before each heart, you're given a riddle that acts as a hint for what you need to do to collect it. And even within the levels, arrows will show up to help point you in the right direction. Sometimes not the best, but often they're very helpful. In all the levels, there are 3 Wraith Hearts that you will always be able to collect. First off, we have these skull jars that you need to collect 6 of throughout each level, with some being scattered all over acting as a scavenger hunt, while others will be a bit closer together like on a chandelier or in tapestries. Second, we have the Wraith Heart that is collected by first getting 100 of these orbs scattered all throughout the levels, which can be extremely tedious in certain areas. And lastly, we have the portals. On the time dials, you will see these arrows, and if you have the dial set between the arrows, a special door in the level will now be open. It's in these doors you will have to go through a platforming obstacle course to reach the heart. All the other hearts are going to be specific to that level. Some might be at the top of a high tree, others might have you navigate past challenging platforming sections to reach said heart. Or maybe you need to carry some stones to open a door, or even play a video game within the game itself. A few of these hearts are hard to find since the game doesn't convey certain information very well, like how you have to go to a completely different level to complete the heart in another, but most aren't that obscure. In all honesty, the platforming in this game is very fun. What helps is that the levels are set up in a way that it's enjoyable to jump around in them, or to find some shortcuts. Plus, there are even areas within levels that make them feel more distinct, like the inside of a clock in Tempest Manor. A lot of these areas are very well laid out and offer a good challenge, but a fair amount of these hearts are in some extremely challenging sections that will put your platforming skills to the test. These can be both frustrating, especially when the camera isn't cooperating with you, and enjoyable as finally reaching that heart feels fantastic. These are definitely meant for people who enjoy 3D platformers. It's just a shame that there's a live system, as getting kicked out of the level gets old fast. There's also a couple of hidden power-ups like the rock suit and glider, but it's obvious that these were last-minute additions as they are used in so few missions. There are also very few boss fights in the game. To be fair, they are a decent challenge, but at the same time, they become rather forgettable. The platforming is the main star of this game, and good thing too, as it's the best part. Now, visually speaking, I wouldn't say this game is amazing. There are some janky looking character models from time to time, in combination with a few stiff and awkward animations. But there are certain things about the art in this game that I like, such as the talons. They are very striking, as they should be. There are a few cool looking creatures like the underwater wildlife or the Tempest Manor pet, and honestly I like the look of a lot of the environments in Astera. We have a desert mountain peak with a skeleton of a dragon at Dragon Peak, a giant's cozy home in Tempest Peak Manor, floating bubbles of water in the below, and an icy cold mountain in Frostblight Mill. I also enjoy some of the skyboxes like in Timberdale, where you can see suns in the sky and watch them set as the in-game hours pass. The contrast between day and night is fun as well in outdoor areas. While I find a lot of the enemies to be kinda forgettable, I do enjoy the designs of the shadow race you can encounter in certain worlds. There's some voice acting in the game, and it's fine, but doesn't show up too often to be very noticeable. The music, on the other hand, is quite good. I don't know if it's right to say this, but the only way I could describe the music would be that it has a very nice rock-inspired OST that can really punctuate the action. However, at times, there are some more relaxed and atmospheric themes. What's neat is some locations will have some different music depending on if it's night or day to better fit the mood. Pieces of music I would recommend giving a listen to would be Frostblight Mill Daytime, Citadel of Shadows, Tempest Peak Manor Daytime, and of course Timberdale Daytime, as it's one of the best themes in the whole game. Just give the soundtrack a listen to, there's some great stuff here. Aside from a few issues like how the controls take some time to get used to, the camera can be super frustrating, and the game unfortunately has a live system, I still actually like this game. Vexx has some cool moves to play around with. I like exploring a lot of these worlds, and while a good amount of the Wraith Hearts are challenging, it can end up being really satisfying when you finally beat that challenge. I would not at all recommend this game to people who aren't fans of 3D platformers. This game is best for those who really enjoy the genre and want to play something that will test their platforming skills. I've heard some people say this game is a lesser appreciated hidden gem, and I kind of agree with that, as it doesn't seem to have the same level of cult status as Psychonauts or Battle for Bikini Bottom, which is disappointing. This is a solid game worth playing. Sure, I don't love it more than Triple B or Ape Escape 2 and 3, but for the PlayStation 2, this is up there as one of the best 3D platformers. Well, that concludes my marathon, and I hope you had fun. In my next video, I will be trying something new and different, but after that, I'll be back to looking at some more random PlayStation 2 games that I've been wanting to talk about for a while. I'm MCB, and I'll see you guys later.